Mute myself.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Grace Peters, and I work at Smile Train to develop and expand our comprehensive club care programs, which includes our psychosocial programs. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Grace Peters, and I work at Smile Train to develop and expand our comprehensive club care programs. Hold on one sec, which includes our psychosocial programs. Oh, okay, April, sorry, that I think you might be on the live. You might just want to click out of that. Sorry about that. For those who joined us in our LinkedIn Live session over the past 2 weeks, welcome back to our final session for Mental Health Awareness Month LinkedIn Live series. For those who are joining us new today, hello and welcome to our Mental Health Awareness LinkedIn Live series. And please go check out the previous LinkedIn Lives that we posted over the course of this past month on Smile Train's LinkedIn page. This session today we are about to have is the final session of a 3-part series for May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, in which we have highlighted the timeline of psychosocial care for CLEF patients and families from the prenatal period through adulthood. Over the past 2 weeks during these LinkedIn Lives, we have heard from psychosocial experts from Colombia and Ethiopia about the importance of psychosocial care from the prenatal period through the preteen age range for both patients and families impacted by cleft. And today in our final LinkedIn Live series, the last day of the month, we will be specifically discussing the importance of psychosocial care for teens and adults impacted by cleft. Today, I am joined here by April Adao, who is tuning in from the Philippines, who has years of experience working with cleft patients and the cleft community in the Philippines. And without further ado, April, I will pass it over to you to share a little bit more about yourself, and then we will get right into the Q&A session.
Okay. Thank you, Grace, and good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, everyone. I had to think about the different timelines too. But it's a privilege to be here and be invited by Smile Train. And just a bit background about me. I've been a mental health advocate for since I started understanding about mental health, I guess, when I was in my teen years. I graduated psychology from Brigham Young University, Hawaii. I also have associate units here in the Philippines in nursing, and as well as currently completing my Master's of Science in Clinical Psychology from a university here in the Philippines as well. I'm currently affiliated with different clinics. One would be with an international clinic named as Roots Counseling and Wellness. And we cater patients from different countries, namely like Australia, Canada, the US, and New Zealand, and a local clinic here in the Philippines as well, which is near my home. So, and it's been a privilege to be part of the Smile Train team, especially working with Grace and the other team members under the Global Psychosocial Task Force. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, April. So just to get right in and get started, first, I want to hear from you at the teenage through adulthood years. We don't always talk about that within cleft, but especially within psychosocial care. So why is psychosocial counseling important for teens and adults impacted by cleft?
Yeah, I think counseling in itself is already, we all know about mental health and how it is related to caring for the self. But one thing that is important for the cleft community is not just for the patients themselves, but also for their caregivers, namely the mothers or the grandmothers or the immediate people who care for the patients as well. Because one thing that is for sure, since cleft care involves surgeries, is the what you need to know about the caring for surgery pre, operation and post-operation care, and that involves a lot of physical preparation for the baby. If it's a baby, they need to be physically okay, no complications that might occur after or before the surgery and after the surgery. So that in itself, especially if the caregivers are not aware with what will happen, like if they're not used to having seeing blood, all in it, all just to name a few. But most of the time, psychosocial care is also important because once the child or the cleft affected child grows up, they need to handle how society will the how to deal with society as well. And as we all know that society in our day is not that it's not at all kind for some people, but we know we need to teach them the right tools and resources and give them the resources where they can depend on and rely on in whenever certain challenges might arise. For example, like bullying, stress related challenges that causes distress, which eventually affects their physical health. Is sometimes we do not understand that trauma experienced during just the prenatal period, like what Camila um, um, did discuss the first series of this mental health awareness in for Smile Train, is that prenatal is also involves the shock that parents go through, and also not just for the caring for the baby, but also the things that they need to prepare physically, the bottles, feeding, how to give them a bath, how to provide them with the necessary vitamins and other things. So yeah, so those are one of the basic things is basically have them understand the stress and the trauma that they have gone through so that they can provide the necessary care that they need as they go through life, not just for the patient, but also for the caregiver. So they can go hand in hand.
Perfect. Thank you so much, April. What challenges do teens and adults with cleft face related to psychosocial care?
Yeah, most of the time, from my experience here in the Philippines, is first is with the patients. I'll discuss first with the patients, especially with teenagers, is their self-image, uh, and that I could tie that with social media. We all like first and foremost, they would really have the question, "Oh, I don't look the same like other kids," and they already know that. But at the same time, having the society point that to them, emphasizing that you are different, already creates an isolation or sometimes at times discriminating the child from belonging in a certain group. And like what Abraham Maslow would theorize before about the hierarchy of needs, belonging is actually a need and a right for everyone to have. But having that event happen to the teenager would actually be carried on until adulthood. And for most of the patients that I've dealt with, is that's one of the main problems that they go through, having to feel that they belong in a certain group or community, because physically being different already isolates them from the group. So that's one. But one thing that I've also noticed is it's at somehow it is compromised by them. For some of it, I'm just saying for some, not everyone, but for some, they actually um, thrive better in academics. Like they try to prove themselves better by studying hard or being good at something else. But also on the other side, if they do not have that support system, the child doesn't thrive, and eventually they sink in, and we call that event at times as learned helplessness. Like people will, if you know that people call you this or treats you like this, eventually you give in to that because the lack of guidance and support from in order for you to, because having a support system is a protective risk factor from the challenges that one faces. So yeah.
And it's interesting. I feel like the sense of belonging is something that we've heard also in the previous live sessions from the past 2 weeks, where Ifram and Camila have talked about not only a sense of belonging for the patient, but also the parents and caregivers, and how community and how the support groups are so important for creating a sense of belonging for the
Yeah.
patient and for the families. And now that we're here talking about teens and adults as they're coming into themselves and realizing that they look a little bit different and trying to navigate that, I feel like that sense of belonging for this age range of patients specifically is so important that they have that and feel that not only within their communities but also within themselves. So yeah, and again, like with these challenges, how do you work with teens with cleft to help them understand and cope with these challenges, or what resources do you provide them?
One thing that with teens that I work on with them is understanding their emotions. And there's this wheel that I use, I call it the emotion wheel. And it's something that the Gottman Institute uses as well for couples therapy. But I think
Mhm.
it's also very helpful with teens because they get to name the emotions that they feel. And we all know that during our teenage years, even me, I experienced this like during my teenage years, it's so confusing. Like what I feel sometimes is invalidated, but for others, it's okay. But then I eventually, by research and some scientific journals, explained that the society actually tells you to suppress what you feel. So instead of regulating them or accepting what you feel is actually an information for you to understand that, oh, I do not like this happening to me because then eventually you get to do something about what you feel instead of creating a healthy decision instead of a non-healthy one. And so my first go-to is helping the teenager understand their feelings, having them pinpoint that this emotion is actually real. And if you do experience this, it's for a reason. So what do you think is the reason? And then eventually they will share to me, oh, this actually happened. So I guess what I felt back then was this. So for example, it was anger. Oh yeah, that is anger. It's not a sin to get angry. So anger is actually a healthy emotion telling you that something is not right and something that you do not like for yourself or a principle that you believe in, which is right or wrong for you, is not is happening and you don't like it. And you have every right to be angry about that. And then once they acknowledge that oh, okay. And then I eventually ask them, so what did you do about that emotion? I did this and this. Like, okay, and then that's when they get to decide for themselves how to handle those kinds of emotions. So it's a guidance thing that I think is also helpful for teenagers to know, and with the caregivers as well, that emotions for teenagers are actually not to be suppressed but to be guided how to handle it and eventually help them use their decision making for the right reasons with that emotion. So yeah.
I'm sure that that is super helpful, not only for teens, but then moving into other aspects of their life as they grow and face other challenges, recognizing emotions and understanding that it's okay to feel that way, and
Mhm.
having the tools to be able to then regulate their emotions, like you said. I think that that probably sets them up for other challenges or things that might happen in the future, not only within their cleft journey, but in other areas of their life as well.
Yeah, that's true. And I just wanted to add, Grace, because one of the things that I also observed here in dealing with patients is that sometimes when we talk about emotions, when I'm talking with a teenager, the parent also butts in like, oh, is that so? Oh, that's how it should be handled then. Like, yeah, mommy, yes, daddy. And it's then a three-way conversation eventually that allows the mother and the child or the parent and the child to have and learn a conversation. And that's where role playing comes in, or probably like what Ephraim also talked about the last time, is it's very important for the teen to feel safe with an adult so that they can eventually communicate with them. So yeah, it's interesting, that experience I had.
Yeah, and I know these different resources are probably used for teens and adults. Do you see any variation between what an adult might respond to or need in terms of coping with emotions or different challenges that might come up versus teenagers?
Well, for teenagers, they need the vocabulary
Mhm.
to put a label to what they feel, unlike the adults who are very rich in experience, and they would really you would really but sometimes they also need the vocabulary for it, especially if they've gone through very traumatic experiences themselves. So probably not so much variation, but with the adults, I handle them differently in terms of having them look in their inner child, like talking to their inner child, and then going back to, there's a retrospective events that happen. So it's a much more complicated situation with adults, but definitely the same. It's just the same,
Yep.
almost the same.
Super interesting. So we talked a little bit about resources, but do you have any other resources or tools that you provide to teens and adults to help them manage these medical and emotional aspects of having a cleft?
Yes, I usually use the World Health Organization's stress management manual. They did have that. I think they did that during 2022 during the pandemic. They just made illustrations about what stress is, what you can do, like grounding, breathing techniques. And usually with teenagers, it's interesting to let them know the difference with inhaling and exhaling through the nose from the mouth, um like, oh, this is more effective. And then eventually they calm down. So and then that's one thing that has been very effective with the teens that I work with. Grounding is still a thing. Like when we say grounding, it's going through your deepest emotions, and then eventually you there's a physical exercise that you do where you try to hold yourself, like hug yourself like that, and then eventually being able to help others as well. So but yeah, it's there in the manual. Other things that I also do, yeah, art, like what Ephraim did, and role playing are very, for me, the role playing is also a revelatory experience for both the therapist and the patient, because some things are unearthed with concerns that are not really under the awareness of the patient. So it's a really good tool also, that probably some of our listeners can also use. And I'm also sure they also have their own, and I would love to learn from them as well.
Yeah, I feel like role playing is super important to, especially for patients that are learning how to talk about their cleft. And you know, we talked with Ifram last session about how teens and middle school or preteens and middle school age patients are first really starting to be asked about their cleft, or other kids in school are starting to notice that they might look a little bit different.
Mm.
But that's also the same, I think, with teenagers, you know, attending high school and you know, starting to meet other people if they're going off to college and going to new towns, or involving themselves in different communities. Being able to respond to questions related to their cleft is super you know, important, because that can sometimes be really stressful. And having role play, I think, is a really good way to practice and manage that.
Yes, and role playing also somehow lessens anxiety provoking thoughts with teens, and it's really found effective really with using that method.
Yeah. So our final question, and then we'll get into some questions from the audience, is what are some success stories that you can share about teens and adults with cleft and their families that you have worked with, specifically in the Philippines?
One thing that stood out to me is one of the adult patients that I have come to talk with, and he had gone through 6 operations, and he shared his story with the support group that we were with that time, and all these the parents and the kids were really attentively listening to him. And then one parent asked, should my child also go through the same journey as you did, because he already is with his orthodontic care and doing his orthodontic care, and he said, well, it's up to you, mommy. But I would suggest that yes, but the healing process is really helpful when you see someone who has already been through that. So support groups are really important. The community and the camaraderie that they develop, being in a community that they feel that they are safe and that they belong there, has been one of the success stories that I have really cherished so far at this journey with Smile Train that I've been through. So yeah, support systems are really good, support groups.
That's so great to hear. And you touched again on safety and belonging, which I think are two very important and aspects. And I love that story. I've actually, you know, being born with a cleft and going and meeting other families through Smile Train in the U.S., but also in other parts of the world. I always do have parents come up to me and ask me, you know, about my journey, and for them it's very empowering to see somebody who has a job and is speaking clearly and is confident. It's really encouraging for the patients and the families to see that and know that, you know, if you
You
go through,
can be
yeah, you can you know,
successful.
okay. Okay, so we have a few questions from the chat. First, we have, how involved are parents in the psychosocial care for their teens?
How involved? Oh, that's a very tricky and really good question. Because one of the things that, well, teenagers, one of also the questions that I get from parents is, she or he doesn't talk to me at all. And I'm like, yes, mommy, that's true. She doesn't want to talk to you because again, I think it's really important that we just listen to our teenagers, because sometimes listening is actually just what they need. Because when we listen, they feel that they belong, that they feel their emotions are accepted, their experiences and their stories, how berserk it may sound to us as parents, but it's really them. It's their individuality and how they understand through their eyes. And all we need to do is just help them be there for them, and just be there guiding them that, oh, I see you. That must be hard for you. And so involvement as a parent is sometimes just your presence, being emotionally present with them.
And it's something that we chatted about yesterday, April, was you talked about the challenge sometimes of knowing when parents need to let go of their emotions and just know that
Mm-mm.
it's obviously this is a huge journey not only for the patient but also for the family. But there does come a point when the teen needs to let go and really just feel their emotions without their parents, you know,
Yep.
emotions or experience intertwined. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, and that reminded, thank you, Grace, for bringing that up, because that reminded me of, I don't know if some of the hearer or the audience know about Dr. Amen. He did said in one of his talks that if you really want to raise a mentally resilient child or healthy child, mentally healthy child, let them do the decision making for themselves. Do it, let
Mm.
them do it on their own. Just leave them be, because in that way they grow And decision making, as we know, for teenagers are still developing. But if we let them live their lives and own their decisions and suffer the consequences, no matter how painful it may be for us as parents, they learn. And learning is such a crucial part of maturity for the brain, especially the developing brain of a teenager. So, yeah, suffer as they may be, but it's part of growing up. It's part of them becoming a resilient adult eventually. Mm.
Another question we have here is, when you say role playing, what kind of scenarios do you act out?
Mm. Well, the first thing that came to mind was this the girl, this daughter wanted to role play about saying no to the guy courting him, courting her, and the mom acted as the boy, which was really interesting. And the reason for that, I think that was very the topic, that kind of role playing was very important for the daughter because she was really having a hard time, not just with the guy or his classmate who wanted to court her, because but also wanting to practice how to tell the guy that she has cleft, because that guy only knew her after the pandemic and she has been wearing a mask ever since. So that kind of the role playing topic would actually depend upon how important a topic is for the child.
Hmm.
It's a child-led topic, I would say. Yeah.
And I know, April, I don't know if you have done this with patients, but some other role playing that I know we have done at Smile Train is practicing mock interviews and preparing for, interviews for jobs, or, different life events that happen when you're older and an adult, and talking about your cleft if that does come up, or just building confidence and having professional dialogue, which I think is really great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's also great. I think the adult patient that I dealt with, that he did share to us that one time one of his bosses were he was in line for promotion, but then he didn't get it because the boss said, "Oh, because we have a hard time understanding you when you speak."
Mhm.
So he did feel bad about that, and then we talked about how he can defend, or at least try to get the promotion back for himself.
Yeah.
But he did try, which his courage is really commendable. But yes, mock interviews are also important to really set up and speak up for yourself, gain the confidence that you have, so that your boss can actually understand that, oh, it's not a disability to not just be able to speak clearly, but actually I can do other things a lot better than just speaking. But
Right.
yeah,
Yep.
you know.
Our last question for today, and there are a few other questions, April, on the LinkedIn, but we are running out of time. But our last question here is there a stigma around psychosocial care in the Philippines?
Yes. I say red answer, yes, because it's still a work in progress here. The Philippines is at least in the almost done of being in the awareness part and having a one-on-one therapy with psychologists are being practiced nowadays here in the country. So stigma, hopefully, it can be destigmatized eventually, but with the help of a good support system and a good cleft support community, I know it can be the future is bright. So that's our hope here.
Thank you so much, April. This is absolutely wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, not only for this session, but this past month of learning about mental health and psychosocial care for patients, for their families through their entire cleft journey. Here at Smile Train, we know the importance of psychosocial care and the impact that it truly, truly does have on the patients and families that that we care for. So thank you so much. If you are just tuning in for this session for the first time, this will be posted on the Smile Train LinkedIn page, but please go back and view the other LinkedIn Live sessions that we've had throughout the course of this month. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.